Over the years, leaders and managers have been struggling, giving importance to one set of skills and another, depending if they are in a leadership or in a management situation. Understanding when to apply which skill, that is critical.
Hi, welcome to the Revolving Change podcast, where we help you develop your professional skills to create lasting, measurable change in your career and business. Here with you today is Joanna. I'm a junior coach here at Revolving Change, and also with me is our founder, Mr. Jorge Lobo.
AKA your analog dinosaur, as usual. I guess you'll be
Yes.
promoted to senior coach. I'll never be promoted to senior dinosaur, I suspect.
Yeah, that would be really, really great. But I think before that, though, I want to develop more of my leadership and management skills, which makes it absolutely perfect that it's a topic that we're going to be talking about today. If it's your first time in this podcast, we've talked about leadership and management in the past. So if you want to listen to that first, please head on over to our playlist to listen to that podcast. And today we're going to delve deeper into what leadership and management really is, right? And we've established before that you can't just be a full on leader. You also can't just be a full on manager. You have to be both, right? Does it have to be a 50-50? That's a question I have. Like,
No,
do you have
no,
to be
no, no,
50%?
definitely not. And some of us are more gravitate more towards being better leaders than we are managers, enjoy more one than the other, and feel better. And others gravitate more to be good managers and less good leaders and gravitate more towards it. So no, I don't think we are at 50-50. What we want to accomplish is a harmony on how we apply our ability. But one critical thing I learned over the years working with CEOs and senior managers and leaders and entrepreneurs is that most critical is that you know for yourself,
Mhm.
what do I gravitate towards? And as you do that, you decide what are the skills you're going to further develop, because you could decide to be mediocre at everything or a champion at something. I advocate that we want to be champions at what we are best at doing, our superpowers. At the same time, we know we need the rest of the skills. So what you do, you surround yourself with people that complement you with what you're not strong at, strong in, strong with. So in my personal case, I lack a number of very specific managerial skills. You're probably going to smile. You know that yourself because you complement me in many ways in our day-to-day running of the business, and so do other members of the team. And I don't pretend to go into your area of expertise where you are a super champion, like you don't into mine, but we complement each other and work together. And I inspire you and you inspire me. And that is where leaders and managers develop and help each other to continue developing. You said earlier you need to develop further your skills, your leadership and managerial skills. We all do. I do. I am, as a dinosaur, I keep learning every single day. There's not one day I don't learn. There's always somebody you can learn something from. It doesn't have to be people that you appreciate or like. It's irrelevant. The key is that you are objective enough to seek that knowledge and improve your superpower. So you need both.
Absolutely. When we talked about this the last time, we even mentioned on the fact that depending on the scenario or the situation that you're facing, you might be required to be more of a manager or you might be required to be more of a leader. How do you go about identifying um, which you need to implement in that given situation?
Well, there's for that no formula. There is no magic switch that you say, okay, now I'm a manager, now I'm a leader, now I need this, now I need that. There is none. And a lot of it comes from experience, comes from watching others that are as good as you are or better than you are. Of course, you learn most when you look at people which are better than you are, but sometimes of the ones that are not as good because there are things that you want to check that you're not doing, that go wrong, that don't work, that are ineffective. But the key is that you want to understand which skills of yours apply in which circumstance. So each circumstance that you face, that we face on a regular basis running a business, require a different set of focus, attention, and therefore skills. So if we are in a crisis situation in our company, we're going to need a little bit of leadership to get everybody understanding that the situation is critical. But then we're going to need huge managerial skills to get all the resources working in concert to achieve the results and overcome the situation. At the same time, you still need your leadership skills to get people not falling over the wayside, giving up and panicking and just, affecting the performance that you want to achieve through your managerial skills. So you need both. And the harmony between both will shift and change from one to the other depending on the circumstance and situation you're facing. In my opinion, there is no clear blueprint. You say, okay, here's my formula, here's how it goes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going to be unique also to your personality, to your character as a leader and as a manager. Some people will gravitate more towards one or the other. Maybe as a leader, you will show up a lot with your leadership skills and lean on to a manager that is probably not a good leader, but is a very strong manager, and get that strong manager at your side to push for the results you need short term to turn things around. So there's numerous strategies I've seen, and we have applied also when our business was in trouble 25 some years ago. That you want to use your own skill where it's most effective, but you want to make sure that the other skills needed to solve the situation are also available. So if you don't have them, you're going to be smart, wise, and humble enough to bring in those team members or people that are going to help you with it and push for what is needed. So there is no one simple answer to that question. I don't have it, at least. Maybe somebody smarter than me has it. I don't have it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So from what I from what you said, what I picked up was the fact that if you want to develop one or the other, you tag team with someone when when you need more managerial skills and you feel that you're lacking in that sense, you find someone who has a better grasp of their managerial skills and then learn from that person, right? Yeah, and I can also learn from other leaders or other managers that influence me outside of work. So, yeah, of course, I'm going to pick up from these different people, right? But how do I know? How do I evaluate if what I learned and what I applied is actually working to develop my leadership and management skills?
There's many ways you can do that. One way that we have worked with our mentees and coaches, our clients over years is, me, that I very much expectations, but most than anything else, feedback focused. It's critical that as a manager, which is something I'm not talking about what others do, I also share what I did, what worked for me, is that as there is an event or a situation where my skills were called upon, whatever those skills were, I will take one or two people and have a one on one feedback meeting with them, and I will request feedback. Of course, they have been trained on how to give feedback. I have been trained on how to ask feedback. We all have been trained on giving, receiving, soliciting feedback. That's a condition, of course. But if you are proficient at giving and sharing feedback, I will get feedback from two or three people from different levels. My level, if there is a level above from above and a level underneath, and I will ask them how they perceived my skills. What was the message they got? How did they see my demeanor? How was my communication? How was my attitude? What kind of feeling did I give? Was I inspiring? Was I scary? Was I pushy? I just want to get feedback because that's going to help me understand how I'm being perceived. I know we get the perception management touches into it, like all skills do, touch on management and leadership. I will want to know whether the way I'm being perceived is the way I want to be perceived, whether it's the effective way to be perceived, or whether I want to change something, I want to fine tune, dial in, or modify what I do. And I think that element done on a regular basis on situations where I'm being more of a leader, also when I'm being more of a manager, will give me very interesting and very important information to understand, am I living up to my own standard. I am satisfied with what I'm delivering. Most of the time, you're going to find there's always something we can do better, which is exciting, which is fascinating. But that is a very sure way to get a mirror onto my own performance. And that I would strongly advise everybody to, provided you have been trained and you have trained your team on feedback, to do that.
That's actually very helpful because you can only be objective with yourself up to a certain point, and how you're being perceived really is also important because your leadership and management skills are not for you. They're more for the people that you're actually managing and leading, right?
Correct.
So if anyone's feedback is important, it is theirs.
Absolutely.
Because
100%.
you could be thinking that, oh, I'm such a great leader, I'm encouraging everyone.
Well,
And
most of us don't, but still
then,
we like to believe that we are. So
right? And then here comes your team's like, oh my gosh, here he goes again. Oh my
very
gosh. It's like,
sobering, very sobering. And
yeah, I'm
actually,
like
you know, one thing that
drained.
has a tremendous impact on your leadership and your relationship with your team, when they see you as a humble, normal person like they are, we brush our teeth, we have dinner, we have good days and bad days, we
Mm,
understand we can do better. And that encourages, inspires others to do what you do, which is explore what you do. How much better can I get? What else
mm,
could I change to be more effective, to even feel better at what I do? So
yeah.
it is a tremendous, positive, rich exercise.
Oh, that would be absolutely great. And you're creating a culture, right?
It's
If
part
it
of
is not
impacting
already,
the culture, yes. I mean, which is
right?
a
If
good, it would be a good segue into culture because I wanted to talk a little bit about culture.
mm,
Before we go
why
into
don't
that, I want
we?
to make a very little parenthesis into what we do at Revolving Change because I think this is important. When you hear a lot of, and I'm not going to mention any names because I have no grudges with anybody, but you hear a lot of people that are reporters. They have never done anything of their own in that sense, but they've read a lot of books, they've done a lot of courses, and have interviewed a lot of people, and they just report on what they have learned. We have done the same, but in addition, we have done it ourselves. And that gives us,
Correct.
I would say, the right to be assertive in our message. I'm saying
Mm-hmm.
assertive, I'm not saying right, but
Mm,
assertive. We are convinced. You know, I've often been wrong, but I've never been in doubt. If I'm
mm,
convinced of something, I will go with it. If I'm proven wrong, I'll be happy to learn where I was wrong and I will mend, change, modify, redirect, regroup, do whatever I have to do to fix it. But I think it's important for our audience to understand that we are not just only reporters, we have done it ourselves. Okay, so I think
mm.
that is critical. But let's go over to culture. I think that would be a good segue on what we're discussing earlier, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, actually, that is very important because a lot of the things that you were talking about earlier, like implementing this, getting feedback from your colleagues, the ones higher than you, that, especially if it's not in the SOP of the company, a lot of people normally, as far as the companies that I've been involved in, won't do anything extra than what is required of them. So
Well, I haven't
if
come
you were,
across a company that has this in an SOP. I've never come across that.
okay, you have more experience than
Well,
me,
I've been
given
in
that
a
you're the
few. Yeah.
dinosaur. But you see what I mean? The things that further reinforces that you trying to implement or being an agent of change within your company will definitely affect culture one way or the other, whether it's just within
It
your
always will.
team.
It always will. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
You can go
interesting
to
enough,
people
if you're
like
going in,
Armand Hammer Occidental Petroleum, going many, many years ago, or go to just to Steve Jobs, late Steve Jobs, rest in
yeah,
peace. I mean, what he did in terms of culture is just amazing. I know lots of people work with him, didn't like a number of things about him. There's always going to be people that like and don't like you, that appreciate and don't appreciate. But yes, the way they managed, the way they led, created the culture. The culture was
hmm,
greatly influenced by it. So these are all people which were very inspiring in their own time, of their own in their own way. Things have
hmm,
changed since, but
hmm,
inspiring people with your own leadership and management has not changed. You remain the CEO, the senior VP, the plant manager, very often the board remain key figures in inspiring the rest of the organization, pushing it in one direction or the other. And like you said, but they will do. Is it a good one or a bad one? Time will tell.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually interesting that you talk about the influence of a CEO, just to segue there a little bit, because Starbucks just hired a new CEO, and he used to be the CEO of Chipotle, and he actually grew Chipotle by, if I'm not mistaken, if my numbers aren't wrong, I think about 17% or 700%. I remember it had a
Yeah,
seven in it.
massive. It was massive.
Yeah, a massive increase. So you see what I mean? Like, whoever is at the head, whoever is leading the entire company has a huge, huge influence over the entire company's culture, um, the way
Well, they create the culture.
they
They create culture.
yeah,
Okay, the
correct. So
top creates the culture. Yeah,
what if you're well, again, we were talking earlier about the things you could do on your own to improve your leadership and management skills. What if what you're trying to do goes against the grain of the culture of the company?
I think the point is, do you want to change the culture or you don't? If your intention is to change the culture, then you do change the culture. But you have to be intentional. Culture cannot be by accident or by coincidence. Culture must be intentional. We want a culture, which we do have, for instance, a revolving change of complete total customer satisfaction and orientation. We have a culture where profit is not the objective, it's the consequence. We have a number of
Mhm.
culture elements in our business which are in our DNA, and they are in the way we treat our own people, our suppliers, and our customers, the way we deal with each other. So culture must be intentional and not coincidental. That is absolutely
Mm.
fundamental. So if I'm running a new business or I'm joining a new company and I have a vision of the culture and I'm strongly and I have the support also. If I'm a new CEO, I have a board and the board supports me and gives me free reign to do what I want to do. I will do what it takes. I will do what is necessary to shift and drive the culture where I want it to be. Now, the culture is not a light switch, it's on or off. A culture is, and for some companies, depending on the size and the complexity of their business, is going to be like trying to turn the Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier change direction. That takes a lot of effort, a lot of energy. It takes time. It doesn't turn on a dime. So all that needs to be taken into account. How radical is the change of culture you want to accomplish? Are you going to affect the well-being of people long term? How perpetual is the change? Is it short term? Is it the values we're affecting? Is it also the way we apply our values? So it's a kaleidoscope of changes that go with culture. This is an area which we work with many clients many times. Articulating it first is so important to understand the impact of culture. So we say we want customer orientation. Okay. Well, how far do we go? 1,000%. Okay. I remember one of the companies that we run at the time, we had in the culture a value that was money is no objective when it comes down to service and satisfy a customer. And that meant whoever was in charge could spend any money they needed to satisfy the customer to solve a problem that we have with the customer. I'm not talking about bribing, okay? Now that is misunderstood. I'm talking about flying maybe a team of people to a project and taking immediate action and spending more time than it was budgeted. Okay. So money was not an object. Not that you would say, oh, this, we're going to kill the budget, is going to mess up the project, so we don't deliver. No, we will deliver first, no matter what it's going to cost. So you need, we need to be aware of what is the impact under any circumstance of that particular culture and that particular value. Culture has to be intentional, and it's definitely not short term, and it's definitely not easy.
Okay, so yeah, so that is a very, very broad, not, I wouldn't say broad, it's a very top level
It is.
um, perspective about culture, because I do understand culture comes from the top, right?
Culture is defined at the top and executed throughout the organization. It percolates. It's defined at the
Correct.
top and
Mm.
executed throughout as it percolates the organization. However,
All right.
culture also gets feedback from the bottom up when properly managed to understand how culture is working. Is it percolating? Is the message from the top getting to the bottom and feeding back and not getting distorted? It's so important that interpretation of culture reflects the consistent implementation of that throughout the organization. And the larger the organization, the tougher and more complicated and difficult it is.
Okay, yeah. So I get that. But like, what about earlier? We're talking about I wouldn't say small scale, on a more concentrated perspective of a middle manager, where I just really want to improve my leadership and management skills. How how then will culture influence the things that I need to implement or execute that are not part of the defined culture of the company?
First of all, the feedback exercise that I gave as an example does not only apply to middle manager, applies to the very top. Okay? So it's not just exclusively for one or the other, for everybody. And personally, the top, when they do it, is extremely inspiring and favorably affecting the culture of the business massively, because it's role modeling a behavior that is unfortunately too unusual. But it takes the manager being willing, ready, humble, and it's another number of qualities
Yeah.
and attitudes and behaviors for that to work properly. Now, going to your point, at the lower management levels, if leadership was good, if the culture has been well defined, well articulated, well communicated, and you don't only communicate culture through a pamphlet, or I remember at business coaching we had our culture and we had our charts and we all signed them up, and then you need the processes and the procedures that support those. So if you do have a culture that says that customer service is top, but in the procedures you have customer service at the bottom, it's a disconnect, is a dissonance, and it's going to make that culture not effective and it's not going to work. It's on paper, but it's not in the process. So as a middle manager, you want to make sure that you implement that culture and make it reflect on the process that you are responsible for, on how you communicate with your people, on how you run your location, plant, department, you're part of the business. So middle management, or other than top management, all levels will use the feedback techniques if they've been properly trained, and if they were revolving change customers, they have been and they still use it and they perpetuate that practice, and they train new people as they come in, because that's very important, because culture is dynamic. You need to have everybody convinced and everybody on board. So it requires repetition, it requires bringing new people on, and it requires also occasional adjustments, right? Because conditions change and then culture evolves. Culture is not cast in concrete forever. You perpetuate culture in terms of making it dynamic. You adjust it as conditions change. So getting to the middle manager, that middle manager needs to, first of all, believe in the culture, follow the leadership. So if this manager has good leadership, understands the culture, will apply those values into its own processes, procedures, priorities, communication with whoever they are, suppliers, customers, their staff, their peers. So if you have several departments working together, and you have one or two that are not in line and not have the same drive following the values and the culture, of course you're going to have a disconnect. You're going to have a performance problem. You're going to have friction. You're going to have a loss of productivity, motivation, communication, whatever the impact is going to be. So having everybody connected and everybody on the same page, applying the same, is going to be very important. But that's the responsibility of top management. Now, there are tools that we have used, that we have at Revolving Change. I don't know if you want me to elaborate a little bit on that. Tools to measure and to keep an eye on how are the values, priorities, and culture of the company being managed by everybody. So we have our diagnostic tools, where we can take, a picture, moment picture of where do we stand today? What are the priorities as they are today? How have we communicated them? How we have developed processes and procedures to support them? And how is everybody else lining up behind it? Are all noses pointed in the same direction? Or we have people that maybe misunderstood, that maybe have a problem with it, or don't have the support, or they don't have the systems. Maybe you are convinced that you need to do it and you want to do it, but you don't have the means and you have not been given the means to do it. So it's another management problem that we have to need addressing. So having a tool, a feedback tool, in this case, the diagnostic tools of revolving change, that would help you gauge that congruency of everybody is extremely important. And what is equally important is once we've done it once, we need to redo it for two reasons. One is because it hasn't changed. We want to stay aligned and focused and want to see that we all are still working in the same direction. Or because there are certain small shifts in priorities, there are shifts in values. Maybe because of the difficult situation we have today, we still customer service stays number one, but maybe profits that were number five now become number four. I'm not suggesting sequence because our diagnostic tool doesn't work with sequential uh, valuation. It's a different process that we have. Did I answer your question? That was a long answer.
Yeah, it was indeed a very long answer, but the diagnostic tool is insightful to know where or what is the existing culture of your company, and it also tells you a perspective of like how far am I from the culture that I thought I had. If I was the CEO, I'd be like, wow, that's an eye opener. I thought we had this culture, and now we actually don't.
Yep.
And in diagnosing the leadership and management culture within a company is very important because then you're able to identify and pinpoint exactly where it is that your company can do better, right? And
It's extremely
I think it's
important.
also, yeah, it's really important if you also have all of your managers equipped really well. Their leadership and management skills have been honed. It also removes the additional workload on the brain of the upper management, because that's the reason you have managers, right? These are your teammates to help your company run at areas that you can no longer reach as top management. So imagine what would happen to the company's efficiency,
Let me tell
its
you what's going to happen.
outputs,
Let me use
its
an analogy.
services.
An
Okay.
analogy. Sorry to interrupt you. An analogy because I'm thinking
Yeah.
of it. It was just
You got
striking my mind.
excited.
Yeah,
Yeah.
an analogy from an example from the Olympics, because I mean we just
Mm,
finished, well, not here in France, but nearby. Um,
yeah.
so imagine you have the canoe rowers. They're in a canoe with a knee down and they're rowing, right? So imagine you have 15 canoe rowers, and they're all your 15 departments and top managers, and they all start rowing, and they all start rowing in different directions. Imagine what kind of mess that would be. Imagine what kind of race that would be.
Chaos. Yeah.
Total, right? So you have a loss of energy, a loss of focus. Now, two or three, four or five of them go in the same direction. The others go right, left, center, back. They stay where they are because they don't know where to go, because they're confused, because everybody else is going in different directions. So that's confusing. So yes, I mean, I like to use analogies and examples of nature. Have you seen when the flocks of birds fly in unison and these beautiful
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
images? How
Yeah.
do they know? They don't crash into each other, right? It's just phenomenal. You don't have one going to the left and one to the right and one upper. No, they're all going the same direction. It's phenomenal how nature already foresees, this coordination and this drive where all effort goes in the same direction. Nature has so many examples how they coordinate their activity for the common achievement of the goal. And this is not culture, okay? This is just coordination of processes and intent. But we are allegedly more intelligent and have a different capabilities. So we can have a culture with all the values that go behind that, supporting that effort.
Yeah, that's absolutely a very very vivid image of that's an ideal way of how a company should run. But reality is so far from that's a dream. From what I've experienced so
Well,
far, that's a dream.
allow me to come with a word of caution. While I agree with
Okay.
what you're saying, you still need the people, the team members that are going to push in different directions, They're going to create friction and contention to create, to enlighten and to wake creativity, to change direction, to discover new boundaries, discover new performance levels. So it's not just complete
Yeah.
100% harmony.
Hmm.
Nature works that way, but we need something else. We want to grow. I don't want to create a perception that if you're all sheep and all run in the same direction, things are going to be okay. No, that's not. That was not the message, right?
Yes, that is not the message. So I just want to reiterate that. What we're saying about that is that everyone is locked into the goal and everyone has the freedom to actually do what they think would bring the company closer towards that goal. That's where the conflicts creativities comes in because everyone has that's what we're calling a welcome conflict, a welcome heated um, passionate discussions between team members and leaders and stuff like that
It doesn't
because
have to be a conflict, right?
yeah, oh
It doesn't
yes,
have to be a
that's why I
conflict.
said passionate discussion.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because everyone is so locked into the goal, everyone wants to get there, and that's the harmony and moving as one that we're talking about when it comes to the culture that we want, the harmony of the culture that we want in a company, not that everyone follows blindly.
I was turning around looking at for the book of Tony Buzan, which
Yeah.
it's very rich in terms of how to run certain meetings with different roles you have in meetings.
Hmm.
And we used to do that in business coaching also, which was when you have an idea, put your different hat on, the seven hats. Be negative, be positive. And we're not going to go into now Tony Buzan because it would take this podcast much too long. But there's so many techniques which you have, which are available out there for everybody to use. I mean, they're not
That's true.
ours. We have borrowed them and used them, and they are Tony
Hmm.
Buzan's. Uh, he was very, very great, one of my mentors, and I learned so much
That's
from
true.
him.
Now
Um,
that you've actually piqued my interest with that. If you're listening to this podcast right now or you're watching us on YouTube and you want us to explore on the topic of how to absolutely put on the 7 different hats that Jorge is talking about, let us know in the comments below or send us a message directly and we'll gladly, when I say gladly, we will gladly create a podcast or maybe even a live and invite you on board so you can interact with us and ask us questions as we do it. Because at the end of the day, we are here to help you
Absolutely.
develop your professional skills. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead,
No,
Jorge.
no, that's good. No, I mean the gladly is for Joanna, not necessarily for me, but I'll join the gladly also. Just kidding.
Okay.
Uh, no, I think that it's there are so many tools out there to deal with these differences, these exciting changes, and I call them confrontations that we have done in our program, but also in our podcast. That is a positive thing, a confrontation, not always negative, although the negative connotation of the word, to explore what is the potential of an idea, the potential of a change. How will this affect what we're doing? And much of this can percolate to or affect the articulation of our values. It will affect the way our values and culture work. So that's where I'm saying culture has to be perpetuated. But when I say that, I don't mean that the culture itself is perpetual. The fact that we have a culture, maintain a culture, and share the culture, that should be perpetual. The process of maintaining and sharing the culture, nurturing the culture, that is where perpetuation comes in. The values change, cultures grow, evolve, hopefully, in the positive way. We know in the old days, I remember, well, I don't want to mention the because it has to do with certain politicians of the time that did certain things, supply side economics, etc. But you had people that run airlines and run them into the ground because the pursuit was profits, 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 and they just squeezed it to the point where it killed it. You use the example of Jan Carlson, at the time CEO of SAS, Scandinavian Airline System. He wrote this amazing book. I read it a few times. I can recommend that book to everybody. It's old, but it's so much alive,
Mm,
which is Moments of Truth, which is
mm,
giving, empowering people to apply their culture at the level when they're meeting the customer. That is a moment of truth for a business, right? When you interact with your customer. So he inverted the pyramid and gave the power to the employee. So he just created a culture and perpetuated that culture until else came and they changed their minds and drove the company in different directions. And so culture is perpetual. You always have a culture. The
Mm.
key is that you nurture the culture with the values that you want, and you have the
Hmm.
processes and procedures that support those values, that make them work,
Mm.
that make them percolate in the organization.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely valuable insight. And very much a lot to digest, especially when it comes to culture, though. So if you're listening to us today and you are part of top management and you can influence culture, we highly, highly recommend that you diagnose the culture that your company has right now. And if you want us to help, we're here. Just to send us a message or book a call with us, and it's for free. You should just visit our website. It has been an enjoyable time today here, Jorge. And as much as I would like to continue this discussion with you, I believe we have to end it today. And with that being said, I'm gonna just stop it right here and say goodbye. I am one of your hosts, Joanna, and here with me today was Jorge Lobo, our founder. And we are here saying goodbye and see you in the next podcast. Bye.
Leave me your comments or questions.
Yes.
Bye bye.